Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaber.io, and I'm here today with Millie Fotso, the CEO of North. Good afternoon, Millie. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Super excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, so to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Cameroon and have moved around quite a bit in my lifetime. I've actually moved around about 15 times, which is more than the average person. So across like 8 states, 4 continents, 6 countries, kind of been everywhere. Went to undergrad in California and straight out of undergrad ended up in New York at L'Oreal. I was in their global marketing department where I basically helped the labs formulate like the formulas 2 years out for new products, and then did the 360 marketing strategies as well to disseminate to the local markets. After some time at L'Oreal, I realized that it just wasn't a good culture fit for me. I didn't want to be in CPG, didn't want to be in beauty. And so I left and I ended up traveling for 6 months. And I lived in a different country every month for those 6 months while contracting actually for a company called Remote Year. And did some soul searching, realized that I, wanted to make a bigger impact in the world. And I think that there are really 2 ways to make a more scalable impact, and that's politics or technology. Decided I did not want to go into politics, so went the technology route and ended up in Austin, where I was in the global business group at Facebook for a couple of years. Really loved my time there, but I had started kind of a side hustle while working at Facebook in the corporate relocation industry and the home industry, helping people relocate because that's what I've done my entire life, and then helping them settle as well. And at some point, a mentor of mine said, Millie, like you have a business, you should probably consider leaving Facebook. Like this is legitimate. And so that's what I did last year in August. I left Facebook to found my first company, which was called Piece of Home. I joined an accelerator program called Divinc for underrepresented founders in Austin. And that business was going pretty well until, as you can imagine, COVID hit, and corporate relocation took a really big hit as well. So ended up shutting down that first business in March of this year and founding with my current co-founders, Avery and Toba, who I actually met during the accelerator program, founding North. And so North is what I'm working on right now. And super excited to tell you more later on in the conversation.
Cool. And interesting that you left Facebook and you're doing relocation, and Facebook has gone fully remote, as you probably know.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling there's a bunch of people leaving Menlo Park right now.
And there are.
Because have you been to the Facebook campus?
Yes, I have. Yep.
I mean, I remember when that was just the Sun Microsystem building, and that was fields all around there. And you drive down there now, and it's like, oh my God, this is like
it's huge. It's a
an
different world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what's going to happen to that whole area, because they really built that up.
Yeah. So, I mean, my hypothesis, right? Like a lot of people are talking about the future of work and everyone's going remote. And I think that we're probably going to go somewhere in the middle where we're not 100% working in the office, but we're also not 100% working at home either, right? So there's still going to be some use for the office space, but yeah, I'm sure that they're going to have to downsize a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're going to have what we call a hybrid model eventually, where there will be an office, but you're not going to have an assigned desk. Yep. It's going to be, people are going to come in at different times and just kind of gather together and work together as needed. And then they're going to go home or wherever, to Starbucks and do their job. If all they need is an internet connection and a computer, you can do it from anywhere.
Exactly.
And like, you're from Austin, and I know you're not in Austin right now. I assume you're working, right?
I am. Yep.
You're not at home or at your office. So
exactly.
So, I mean, what has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employee and an employer?
Yeah. So, I mean, as an employee, as I mentioned, I was with Remote Year, in 2017. So I think much before, remote work really became as popular as needed as it is now. And with them, their ethos was essentially what you just said, right? Like you can work anywhere as long as you have a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection, you're good. So I was traveling well with them and working US hours, but I was in Europe and in Africa and right, like in all of these places, working US hours. And at that time, remote work was kind of taboo. And my job was essentially to convince employers to allow their employees to go remote and travel with us. And it was interesting to kind of understand, right, like the different challenges with remote work. And I think the biggest one was like, okay, are my employees actually going to be doing their work? And then two, how do I communicate with you when you're across the world? But obviously we have like technology everywhere. So it widely has been a really good experience for me. And I think that it's definitely needed, right? Just generally.
Yeah, no, the technology is definitely there. I think it's the things you talk about. It's that trust factor, but I think people are learning how to interview and find the right person for what they need. I think most people, if they truly enjoy their work, you don't have to worry about them working.
Exactly.
Right? So it's kind of cool. And I'm just curious, what about L'Oreal? Did they make you go into the office?
Yes. So L'Oreal was the complete opposite. And that's probably why I gravitated towards remote year right after being at L'Oreal, because they had very strict hours. You had to be in and at your desk at a certain time. You had to be at your desk like 90% of the time, right? So it was a very FaceTime focused culture. And in some ways, a kind of micromanagement focused culture as well. And that's not something that I enjoyed, right? Like I do my best work when I'm allowed to choose when and where I can work. And oftentimes I work too much when you give me that freedom.
I know.
So it's to the company's benefit, right? So.
But that's kind of like the Google model, whereas they, you have 3 square meals a day there, and they have a gym and they have everything. So it's kind of like it's just you're staying there, and as opposed to at your house.
Exactly. I mean, I think even at Facebook, right, we get 3 meals, we have all these amenities, and I had to be really conscious of the fact that we had those things to keep us at work longer. And so for me, it was right about saying, okay, we have all these perks, I'm going to take advantage of some of them, but I still need that work life, I wouldn't say balance, but some kind of like, synergy, I guess, work-life synergy, and not let work take over my life, but also, flow in and out.
I've been working from home for over 10 years. And one of the things I did very early on was I joined a gym. And I just said, I'm going to go to the gym at 5:30. And it might be a light workout, but I'm just for that very reason. It's both physical and mental health, is right. Yep. Or because you would. I mean, there's days where I would still be working till 8 o'clock.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so much easier when you're at home. I think, working out of a cafe or co-working space also helps a little with some of that, because you're seeing movement around you. But being at home, my fridge is right there. I can walk 2 feet and then come right back to my dining room and keep working. So.
Yeah, it's funny because to me now, it's like when I get up in the morning, first thing I do is get a cup of coffee, turn on the computer, and that's booting up while the coffee's coming on, and there we go. I'm ready to go.
There's my commute.
And I used to have it's a 20-foot commute. I used to have to drive into San Francisco, which, is at least an hour.
Yeah, much different.
Yeah, so it's you are more productive, I think. So what is the story? Let's talk about North now. What is the story of North? Who's your customers? What's your product? All these things, and what prompted you to start the company?
Yeah. So North was founded around end of March, beginning April of this year. So we're still a pretty new company. We're a team of 3. So it's myself and my 2 co-founders. And as I mentioned, we had met as part of the accelerator program. So I was the solo founder of my startup, and then they were co-founders of a different startup. Obviously my background is in business and marketing. Their backgrounds are in product and engineering. So when I decided to shutter my first company, we all had a conversation where we said, we have really complementary skills, we get along, let's just form this team and figure it out from there. And at the time I was in Austin, my co-founder Toba was in Houston, my other co-founder Averett was in Detroit. So distributed team, but we decided to form the team. And then the next question was, okay, we have this great team. What problem do you want to tackle? And as we had conversations about the problems that we had faced starting our first companies and the problems that we were facing in our lives just generally, we realized that there's this theme of, how do I use the work tools that I have to the best of my abilities and kind of get the best bang for my buck, right? Like there's a sea of SaaS out there and it's just going to continue to grow as we continue going remote and really diving deep into kind of the tech space. And so for us, there's so many options. How do we make sure that each employee is using the tools that they have? And our hypothesis when we first started the company was that if we had this like smart coach that leveraged machine learning and essentially, watched you as you worked and then said, hey, Millie, I noticed that you're doing this one thing manually or in this way, you should try this tip, right? Almost like a smart clippy that was gonna help with parts of that problem. And so we built a really rapid prototype and shipped it out to about 100 people. And what came back was that the prototype was essentially useless. It was a bad user experience. It was like the more annoying clippy, right? Bad user experience, wasn't surfacing relevant or really useful insights for them. So we had to take a step back and say, okay, if this is useless, what would be useful for you, right? Like, what are your pain points in your day-to-day? And the pattern that kept coming up was, if you can take work off of my plate, that would be really helpful, right? Like I do a ton of just really manual, tedious tasks that have nothing to do with my job, but that need to get done. And so as a team, we said, okay, how do we take work off of people's plates? And the answer, or our answer for that, was automation. And obviously, in this remote world, in this future of work world, automation has become kind of a buzzword. But what we realized is that within the automation space, there's still a lot of opportunity to make it more accessible. So there are obviously automation tools out there for like larger companies, more expensive. There are automation tools out there that require robotic process automation engineer. But there's still a big gap for kind of the everyday marketing person or salesperson or customer success or finance or HR, right? And so our tool, North, is a Chrome browser extension that allows a user to automate tasks simply by just doing the task. So the first part of our product is you click our little logo, you hit start tracking. And so that signifies to our system, okay, I'm going to start watching you work now so I can learn this task that you're doing. So you hit start tracking, you do whatever task it is you want to automate. You hit stop tracking, and then the task is automated for you, right? You can now name it, you can share it with people on your team, you can share it with a larger North community so that there are these pre-built automations as well. And then the second piece of it is, going back kind of to our roots, this automating the automations is what we like calling them. So we'll watch you work and say, hey, we've noticed that this week you've done this one thing every day and it takes you 30 minutes to do this thing. You can actually automate this. Here's the automation. Would you like to accept it? And then you can say yes, and that thing is taken off your plate and you never have to do it again. So that's in a nutshell.
Is it purely browser based, or is it that part, or is it just something you install? Right? You know what I mean?
Yep. So right now it is browser based. It's an extension that you would install within your Chrome browser.
And any plans to install it in Edge?
Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of plans for expansion, but as I'm sure you know, as you're building software, you have to kind of focus first and then continue building. So,
and I would agree, I would start with Chrome. Although Edge is now Chromium based, so I think the integration will actually be easier than you think, because Edge, that's the big switch Edge recently made, is they went to the Chromium based platform. So it's a lot more like Chrome. I think Microsoft finally said, yeah, theirs is better. Let's just go. So, I mean, you really had to start remote just by the nature of where the three of you were. I mean, unless you also all wanted to meet in like St. Louis on a regular basis. And then COVID came along, so you had to be remote from day one, right?
Exactly.
Was that a big adjustment, or was it kind of natural for the three of you?
It was pretty natural for the three of us. We all are technology founders, and we're technology founders in the past. So we know the ecosystem well. We know what tools to use to really keep on top of communication. I think the second thing is that there's this layer of trust with us and this layer of understanding how to communicate with each other. So when we formed the team, we did an exercise where it was essentially, we did like those personality quizzes to understand, how do I receive feedback? How do I give feedback? Where do I work the best, or at what hours do I work the best, to really, get those kinks out of the way from the get-go. And I think that's something that remote teams kind of miss in the beginning, is having those conversations around communication, around work hours, so that problems don't arise right in the future.
And it sounds like going forward, as you hire people, that will also be just part of your onboarding process, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's interesting because I'm assuming you didn't just decide on March 15th, wow, we're going to start this company. You were in plans for it pre-COVID, and you decided to go full bore. I mean, really, when the pandemic really started in the US, right?
Yeah.
So did that cause any challenges that you didn't expect? Because I'm assuming you started the company with the idea you'd be able to travel as much as you want and do this and get to go to see customers, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the pandemic has in some ways opened doors for us, right? Because right now we're sitting on Zoom and having this conversation, right? And everyone is now forced to have conversations virtually. And so that means that you don't have to travel, and there's no expectation of travel, which is a budget saver, is a time saver.
Yeah.
So we're able to have more conversations now. Yep.
And you couldn't say to a customer beforehand, I can't come and visit you just because I don't want to.
Exactly.
I would love to come visit you, but there's a pandemic going on.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So it did kind of help you, I guess. Wow. So to finish, there's companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products. You already have an engineer on staff, it sounds like, right? And that engineer obviously understands artificial intelligence, right?
Yes.
So a good engineer. But when you start to expand, how important do you think it'll be to leverage companies like ours that provide software development and those skills, and we provide them on a timely manner, and you don't have to pay for like someone in Silicon Valley, as an example?
Extremely important. I think one of the benefits of remote work is that now, or distributed work, is that now you have options for your talent pool, right? Like you don't have to be in Silicon Valley to access some of the best engineers. You don't have to be in even Austin, right? Like somewhere like Austin, you can hire someone from a small town in Indiana who is just as talented as the person in Silicon Valley, but couldn't make it to Silicon Valley, so otherwise wouldn't be able to be discovered. And or you can hire the person in Nigeria or in the Ukraine. And I think that's immensely powerful. There's this quote that I'm probably going to butcher, but it's essentially that talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. And I think that a company like Gaper is bringing down that barrier to entry for those engineers, and hopefully distributing that opportunity more widely as well.
Yeah, that's the goal. So, and I'm going to let you plug your company a little bit more. So do you have a current website where someone can download? First of all, do you have a product, or are you beta right now?
Yeah, so right now we're in alpha, but we do have a website. You can go to getnorth.io to get more information, to sign up for our alpha as well, and to get updates as we continue building.
Great. So hopefully there's some people will listen to this and they'll go out there and get it. And are you actively looking for people to be beta users?
We are. Yep. So if you want,
alpha
before beta, but yeah, if you want, help automating anything, help just taking work off of your plate, those mindless, tedious tasks, then feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. This has been great getting to know you and great finding out about your company.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
There we